Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Today is April 24th, early in the morning, 2013. Today I will address a couple of different subjects. First, I will talk about my thoughts on the recent unfortunate, very, very sad situation at the Boston Marathon. And second, I will talk about autism and my own experiences as an autist and how those experiences have changed over the years. And I will, I think, address both topics in more depth in future programs. First, the Boston Marathon bombing. Predictably, many individuals, both liberals and conservatives, have, in the wake of this horrendous incident, used it to advance their own political and hate-based objectives, with some people arguing that all Muslims should be kicked out of the country, or at the very least, more closely monitored than they are already. I know many people who are Muslims. They are colleagues of mine in some cases. All of them are good, honest people. Not hateful people, and certainly not dangerous people. And yet they are being thrown in with a handful of individuals who in the United States have committed terrorist acts. To be fair, however, if one goes to the FBI website, the majority of terrorist acts committed in the United States have not been by Muslims. They have been by white individuals, in most cases people who self-identify as Christians, in some cases by people who are associated with the Patriot movement, in other cases with the sovereign citizen movement, and in other cases with neo-Nazis, who of course by definition are not Christians. So, using that same basic argument that has been made by some people, that Islamophobic fear of the other, othering, marginalizing Muslims, turning them into people that are not one of us. Very similar to what has been done with Barack Obama, turning Barack Obama into the other, accusing him of being a Muslim, accusing him of being a socialist or Marxist, and accusing him of not being an American citizen born in this country and therefore supposedly automatically ineligible for his job. Whatever might be wrong with any of those hypotheticals, those incorrect speculations, is a question for debate. First, Barack Obama was obviously born in Hawaii. His mother was a woman from Kansas. His father, a Kenyan, did not raise him. When he came to the mainland of the United States, he joined a United Church of Christ church, not a Muslim mosque. Certainly he could have done that. There are plenty of Muslim mosques in Chicago. He became active in various causes. Those causes did not include the Communist Party or any socialist party. President Obama has always represented himself as favoring global capitalism. In his tenure so far as President of the United States, he has demonstrated that his views align quite closely with those of John Maynard Keynes. In other words, Keynesian capitalism, where the government in effect puts people back to work, finds jobs for people. So essentially, Barack Obama is an American born in this country, a liberal Christian, a member of arguably the most liberal Christian denomination in the United States, which to me is not bad, and a global capitalist, which I personally don't care for, but he is certainly not like me. He is not a socialist, or a state socialist, or a democratic socialist, and certainly he is not a communist. A communist meaning somebody who believes in the elimination of government and the elimination of the social class system. So that hate, which has been formulated around President Obama, has now been projected on these two brothers who committed this heinous act in Boston, Massachusetts. One writer even connected these individuals with Barack Obama, not directly, but by claiming that their profile, presumably their criminal profile, and the profile of Barack Obama are the same. So all these kinds of hateful and ludicrous statements that have been made, in any event, arguing that all Muslims should be kicked out of the country for being Muslims, is as ludicrous, if not more so, than arguing that all white males, white Christians, should be kicked out of the country for being white Christians, since they have a much higher rate of terrorist acts in the United States, proportionately, than Muslims. So the argument fails when it starts. There is no ground to it. It is based on nothing more than hate, bigotry, and Islamophobia, unfortunately. So that's been bothering me, and I wanted to mention that. Now to transition to the other subject, I suppose one of the reasons why it does bother me is because I am an autistic. Autistics very commonly have a strong sense of social justice. I have always had that since I was a little kid. I could never stand lying. I would always be horrendously bothered whenever anybody would, I thought, lie to me. I was obsessed with honesty. So, as an autistic man and as an autistic boy, I have been and was a person who was really interested in justice and in human rights. Back when I was in junior high school or middle school, I was very politically active. I was involved in various civil rights activities. I was a member of the civil rights organization in my junior high school, which was called the Students' Democratic Coalition. As far as I know, it no longer exists. And in that organization, I helped to hand out petitions to boycott California grapes in solidarity with migrant workers. I protested against anti-ballistic missiles. And I attended a Humphrey Muskie rally where Humphrey Muskie actually showed up in New York back in 1968. Of course, he lost and Richard Nixon won. Since that time, I have recognized as an autistic person that in spite of my original conclusion about autism, namely that autism is nothing more than a kind of neurodiversity, or in other words, neurological diversity, that it should be accepted and no attempt should be made to change or fix autistics, which, by the way, is an idea which the autistic community got from the deaf community. For example, the hostility that many people in the deaf community have toward cochlear implants. Similarly, the hostility toward being cured in the autism community has become a kind of mantra of one faction, which often calls itself the self-advocacy branch of the autism community. Well, I am still a self-advocate. I'm not happy about the fact that the neurodiversity folks have taken over that label as if they are the only ones who support autistic advocacy. But I had a spiritual awakening a few years ago. When I had that awakening, I realized that autism, in my experience, has for the most part not been a very positive experience. Once I was re-diagnosed as being an autistic, and my diagnosis was changed from childhood schizophrenia, which is how autistics of my generation were generally diagnosed, I went onto the web and I looked for information on autism, and I tried to find a sense of community with other autistics. All of a sudden being aware of what my situation was, having a label to put on it, having a category under which to place myself, and categories have always been very important to me. I wanted to be able to interact with other people like myself, and the individuals that I came into contact with were people who were in the neurodiversity band. Now, I have nothing against these individuals. I was one of them for a couple of years. I understand it, I think. There is a sense of, or a sense in which autism is a positive experience. Like anything else, it's not entirely negative. It's not entirely positive either. But what I realized is that the negatives, at least in my life, have far outweighed positives. The lack of empathy was translated for me into a very cerebral or intellectual approach to everything. I approached everything with my mind, not with my heart. When my heart was opened, all of a sudden, I saw things with a new light. I understood things that I had not understood before. For the first time, I experienced genuine love for other people. Rather than having a primarily cerebral relationship with my Lord, Baha'u'llah, and other people, my relationship almost overnight became very heart-centered. Literally, almost overnight. Through my meditative practice, and I think through the intervention of my guardian angel and the other members of my wonderful spiritual family, including my departed parents, my departed spiritual mother, Elizabeth Thomas, and other individuals who had a tremendous influence on me, either in this world or I think in the world to come. And because my heart was suddenly open, I could see all of a sudden what I was missing. And it was a lot. So, whatever might be the advantages of autism, and there are some. Autistics are very rational. As I said, many of us, myself included, have a strong sense of social justice, human rights. Autistics are often quite good in technical fields. Many of us are good in mathematics. That was not me. Although I'm not bad in statistics, I was never that great in math. But in spite of all of the positives, in spite of the ability that autistics often have to focus on a very narrow subject and to become an expert on it by focusing so much on it to the exclusion of everything else, by getting involved in a kind of ritualistic approach to that subject, it's not enough. And I realize that. It simply is not enough. And I wouldn't have known that had I not experienced the opposite. If my heart had not been opened, most likely, I think I would probably still be in that movement, in the neurodiversity camp. So, again, that's why I'm not critical of people who hold to those views. I respect them, I honor them, I understand them, having been one. But now, having had this, and I wouldn't call it an awakening because that's too mental or cerebral or idealistic. I would call it more of a sensitivity or a heartening, perhaps, if that's a word. My heart has become open so much. I can literally feel people I don't know or don't know that well. When one of my students tells me something bad that has happened to them, I feel bad. I have a sense of sympathy and empathy both. I never had that before. Well, I had some sympathy, which is really more intellectual, but certainly not empathy. And without empathy, it's very difficult to have a genuine spiritual relationship, which I think explains why, according to some research which has been done on the subject, so many autistics are atheists, agnostics, religious skeptics, and so forth. If a person cannot empathize with other people, how can a person feel the presence of God? So, at least from my perspective, and I certainly don't mean this as a criticism or put down of anyone else, autism was a horrendous test in my life. In that sense, it was a blessing. It was tremendous suffering that it caused me. But I am grateful that because of the bounty of my Lord, because of the assistance of my spiritual family, that at least to a degree, I have overcome much of it. I'm certainly a long way from reaching anything even remotely close to a final conclusion. I don't think I will ever reach that conclusion. But at least I understand, or I feel what it is that I am trying to reach. Before I never did. Until next time, this is Dr. Mark Foster. Have a good one.